While not near the height of its power, the Vatican still holds influence across the world. It wouldn't hold this place of power without the Holy Roman Empire, who conquered and controlled much of Europe from the 19th to 15th century, nearly 600 years. Historical fiction in video games has been few and far between. Accurate historical fiction, even more rare. The only game I've ever played that explored the Holy Roman Empire with historical accuracy was Kingdom Come: Deliverance. But thanks to Obsidian Entertainment, game director Josh Sawyer, and his team, we have Pentiment. If the name Josh Sawyer sounds familiar, it's because he was the director of Fallout New Vegas, which is one of my favorite games of all time. A few years ago, Sawyer tweeted out that he was directing a new game that wasn't Avowed or Outer Worlds 2. Many hoped this would be a new Fallout game, and were disappointed when Pentiment was revealed to be the game he'd been working on. But even though I'm a huge Fallout fan, particularly of New Vegas, I'm extremely happy that Pentiment was the game he was working on, because the immense passion that Sawyer and his team had for his project is clear as day. Pentiment is a game unlike any that I've played before. It sits somewhere between a visual novel and an isometric RPG, most reminiscent of adventure games from the early 2000s or late 90s. It tells the story of the small German town of Tassing, the lives of its people under the Holy Roman Empire, and the abbey that governs the town. We see this from the perspective of Andreas Mahler, a man who is achieving his master's degree in art by working with the monks at the abbey. It's a grounded, realistic, and mostly historically accurate story that spans 20 years. Unlike an RPG, Pentiment doesn't have skills, stats, or combat, and it's mainly composed of reading dialogue and making choices. Now, when I look at any narrative-focused game, the first thing I ask myself is, should this have just been a book, a film, or another non-interactable art form? There's many narratives that would be just as well without the interactivity. So where does Pentiment sit on this scale? Well, in my opinion, its interactivity definitely adds a lot to the experience. The main thing added is choice, which is plentiful throughout the game. You always have a handful of dialogue options to choose from when interacting with people, all of which make Andreas seem like he might have different views. Most of these also offer consequences that will be felt through the rest of the game. Even your smaller choices are compiled to decide what happens at certain points, with the game even giving you a list showing exactly what led to that consequence at the end of the act. One of the most important of these choices happens at the beginning of each act, where you're able to pick a number of backgrounds which give you unique options and abilities throughout your playthrough. The amount of backgrounds is extensive, from languages you know, focuses like bookworm, hedonist, or occultist. These background choices do a good job at providing a unique experience for each player, as well as incentivizing replays. But overall, no matter what backgrounds and choices you pick, the game's plot will unfold in a very similar way. The differences come from the characters. They can become completely different people over the game's 20 years due to the impact of your actions, and they'll remember who you are and what you've done. The second interactive thing the game has is exploration. While the game is entirely 2D, you move along paths and roads that go up and down to simulate depth. The town of Tassing, Kyrso Abbey, and the surrounding wilderness hold many secrets and interactions that you could miss if you don't explore in the right place at the right time. And the ability to roam about the town, mostly as you please, is a welcome one, allowing us to talk to the villagers and get a real sense of the people in the town of Tassing. The art design of this game is absolutely breathtaking. Using the same art style the artist Andreas has been learning under the monks at Kyrso Abbey, the amount of detail and the coherence with the history the game's linked to is insanely impressive. At nearly every turn, I was impressed by the game's gorgeous art. So many details like font, the framing of the game itself as a book, all of these add so much to the game's tone. It's honestly worth the asking price just for the visual art itself. Surprisingly, one of Pentiment's best gameplay additions is a glossary you can use all the time in-game. Whether historical terms or cultural slang, terms you may be unlikely to know will be underlined. If you click on the underlined term, you'll be immediately given the glossary entry that explains what this means. This is a fantastic gameplay addition and convenience that allows the story to maintain momentum while still staying true to the historical language and references of the time. Each act of the game has its own plot, including 2 murder mysteries that are both very good. While the painter Andreas Mahler is the main character of Pentiment, the city of Tassing and its development is the game's real centerpiece, providing a vignette of the generational change of Christendom, a tale exploring oppression, strife, mob mentality, and the beauty and danger that comes with freedom. The game's themes are brought out very well. Its story digs deep into its themes but never feels preachy, even when you're talking to monks. Its world is very grounded and realistic, almost plain, which I could see turning some people off of the game. But every major event further explores its themes, provides character building, and pushes the plot forward. It's excellently done and is always pushing these 3 things in nearly every scene. And this is really the key to telling a compelling story. It has some of the best character development I've ever seen in a game or even a book. You truly get to know these characters in the town of Tassing, and you get to see them change based upon your interactions with them and the changing world around them over the 20 years the game takes place. Pentiment's historical lens is extremely good. It stays very true to the time period, and I felt like I actually learned a lot about this period of history. Its themes and story have universal timelessness to them, but also it utilizes the setting and makes it core to the story at the same time. Pentiment provides a very interesting exploration of the Reformation and the beginning of the Enlightenment. It explores the cost of learning about flaws or lies in the groups and systems you have faith in, how revolution and change cause pain and suffering, but that change is necessary and inevitable. That knowledge cannot be hidden forever. We can forget the past, but we can never lose it or escape it. When people forget the past, they can never see how history has formed their beliefs and practices, but the past will always create the present and the future. So much of what we think is new is painted over the old, using it as a template. The Holy Roman Empire hoarded books in their monasteries, writing over old pagan texts and artwork with good Catholic works. And in the same way, the stories told through word of mouth, warp and change, through mistakes, subjectivity, propaganda, and bias. Pagan heroes are appropriated and turned into saints. But through these same mistakes, through subjectivity, comes novelty, comes differences. Only through imperfection can anything new come to be, for the perfect is eternal and unchanging. By freeing himself from the shackles of judgment placed on him by art critics, his own self-consciousness, and even some of the monks he trains under at Kierso Abbey, Andreas can come into his own art style, instead of copying those who've come before. The self-consciousness part is done beautifully, represented by dreams Andreas has where he argues with historical figures like Socrates. He starts with logically looking at things and having discussions with them, but for me, it eventually developed into self-hatred and doubt, before crescendoing into acceptance. If you love historical games, adventure games, or are a big fan of Obsidian Entertainment, or the Enlightenment, the Reformation, the Holy Roman Empire, you owe it to yourself to experience Pentiment. One of the tightest, most grounded, and well-written adventure games I've ever played.